We see a pair of mixed bags, and Ricky Stenhouse is a fucking douchebag. But of course, we already knew that, didn't we? Let's get into it. This is the fuel. What is happening, ladies and fuck? What is happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan, and welcome to today's edition of the Fuel. Coming a little bit later than usual, but after watching the IndyCar race late last night, I was pretty freaking tired, considering that I had been up since 5:30 that morning. Because, you know, flea market hunting. But, gonna go ahead and run through this real quick, get this done as quick as possible. So without further ado, let's get into the news of the week that kind of has been happening. So let's get into it. First up, some breaking news on the NASCAR front on a couple of things. It has been reported that Hendrick Motorsports is making a crew chief change to Jimmy Johnson 5 races out of the playoffs and heading into Watkins Glen this weekend. Hendrick Motorsports announced today that Cliff Daniels will be replacing Kevin Meandering, who was in his first year as the number 48 team's crew chief, effective immediately. And of course, this comes on the fact that Johnson's in danger of missing his first postseason since the chase was first established in 2004. He enters 12 points out of a playoff spot. Daniels was actually Johnson's race engineer in 2016 when Johnson won his 7th Cup title. So he was actually Tony Stewart's race engineer for 2 seasons, and then moved to Hendrick Motorsports after 2018. As for Kevin Meandering, he will remain with Hendrick Motorsports in a senior competition role. So this is quite the interesting move by Hendrick Motorsports, but they feel like they needed to make a change in order to get Johnson, into position to try to make a playoff run. Because he's definitely been lagging a little bit the last couple of years. I mean, even though he made the playoff last year, he got knocked out in the first round. Even though he definitely had a shot to make it to the next round at the Roval. But, he's 12 points out of a spot right now. And even though he got some stage points at Pocono, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, he's still 12 points out of a playoff spot. So Hendrick Motorsports trying to move some parts and pieces around to hopefully get him into the playoff this year and keep his long streak going. He has not missed a postseason since it was, since it came into existence in 2004, which is pretty damn impressive. But the next little bit of NASCAR news, and this is a big one for me personally. NASCAR is finally getting rid of the arm's length definition of the uncontrolled tire penalty. What do I personally think about this? Howla frickin' Luya. It is about damn time. I mean, that part of the definition of the rule has been, it's been a disaster, to say the least. I mean, there have been so many missed calls and bad calls coming out of the uncontrolled tire penalty due to that definition of the rule, and it is nice to see that they're finally getting rid of it and streamlining it a little bit more. I mean, an uncontrolled tire penalty should be, like you're seeing, at the bottom of the screen right now. That's what an uncontrolled tire penalty should be, not this arm's length away bullshit like they've been doing the last couple of years. So it is very, very nice that they finally got rid of that definition of the rule. And hopefully there will be some more good things to come in the near future as far as rule changes. But we're going in the right direction right now. And last little bit of news, and this was reported only a couple hours ago at the time I'm recording this. McLaren. They say that a full-time season in IndyCar for 2020 is back on the table. Now, Fernando Alonso has made it clear that he's not interested in a full-time run in 2020. But of course, he's going to be back for the Indianapolis 500, obviously, because he's still going for the Triple Crown of Motorsport, and the Indy 500 is the third and final piece to that puzzle. And he is not going to walk away from a shot at racing immortality. And even though things didn't go his way this year, McLaren, from what I've heard and from what the story says, they're really going to redouble their efforts and make sure they are much more prepared for a run in IndyCar in 2020, particularly in the Indianapolis 500. But there are sources that are saying that McLaren is pursuing full season partnership with an IndyCar team for 2020. So they're kind of looking for a team up, kind of like they did with Andretti a couple years ago, to hopefully make a competitive run in 2020. But in addition, they're also looking at Colton Herta, which is kind of interesting. So, yeah, with Alexander Rossi re-signing with Andretti Autosport, which, you know, I kind of had a feeling that was going to happen. I mean, even though he was the biggest free agent on the market at the time, because, I mean, his contract was up at the end of this year. But he was obviously going to re-sign with Andretti Autosport. I mean, because the core pieces of this team is, you know, with Andretti Autosport. And he's got a great shot at the championship this year. And honestly, the last 4 races of the year favor him over Newgarden. And he actually managed to cut the point lead down a little bit, which we will get to here in a minute. But, yeah, according to reports, McLaren Racing CEO Zach Brown has engaged in significant discussions about forging an alliance with an existing IndyCar team. And it looks like there's a potential deal with Arrow Schmidt Peterson Motorsports, who currently employ James Hinchcliffe and Marcus Ericsson. So that would be an interesting deal. And apparently there were rumors of this pairing of these two teams surfaced all the way back in May and gained a lot of steam when the Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports team title sponsor Arrow announced a partnership with McLaren's Formula One program. Of course, McLaren, you know, one of the oldest teams in Formula One and one of the most successful teams in Formula One, although they're currently not in that position right now. It really seems like their best days are behind them. But there definitely seems like there might be a partnership between Schmidt-Peterson and McLaren for 2020, which wouldn't be a bad partnership, you know, in fairness to McLaren, because Schmidt-Peterson, you know, they've contended for wins in recent years, and of course, with Robert Wickens last year, I mean, it really is a shame that Wickens had that devastating crash at Pocono and got that spinal injury, because Wickens showed that he could wheel a race car, and I mean, he definitely would have been a future championship contender for years to come if he hadn't had that injury. Of course, he's going through hellacious rehabilitation to try to get back in the seat, but the odds are still not looking good for that, unfortunately. But But now if McLaren and SPM do decide to team up, McLaren is looks like they're trying to make a lucrative offer to Colton Herta, who currently drives for Harding Steinbrother Racing. And of course, he became the youngest winner in IndyCar history at Circuit of the Americas. So he's definitely got the pedigree, to say the least. So that would be quite the interesting team up. McLaren with Schmidt-Peterson and having Colton Herta as their driver for the 2020 season. It'll be interesting if all of us comes together, and we're certainly going to be keeping an eye on this as it develops. Silly season, man. It is one of the craziest things in motorsports, because there's always these moving parts and pieces, teams trying to make deals, and all this other stuff. So this is something we're definitely going to be keeping our eyes on for sure. But now that we got that all sorted out, let's go ahead and get into the race reviews. First up, the Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into this, get this over with. Will Power starts from the pole for the 57th time in his career. Only Mario Andretti has more poles than Will Power at this point. However, Power has not won this year, and his streak of winning at least one race per season is in jeopardy at this point with 4 races to go. 5 if you count Mid-Ohio. So got a good clean start. This race was definitely a bit of a mixed bag, which I will talk about here in a minute. SPM teammates, speaking of which, Hinchcliffe and Ericsson make contact after bouncing off Ericsson bounced off of Takuma Sato, tried to make it 3 wide going into turn 4, and bounced off of Ericsson, which bounced him into Hinchcliffe. So both SPM cars their days were pretty much ruined, as was Sato's. Ericsson had significant damage to his car, which put him out on lap 1. Hinchcliffe was actually able to continue on after replacing a broken toe link, but his day was pretty much ruined. So Power leads lap number 1. Graham Ray Hall leads off green flag pit stops on lap 10. There were some teams that were opting to go with a 3-stop strategy, and there were some teams that opted to go with a 2-stop strategy. So a large number of the 3-stop cars come in on lap 13, and unlike last year, these 2 strategies would eventually come together at the end of this race. Bourdais does a 360 in the keyhole after contact from Colton Herta, but keeps it going. It was a nice 360 and kept it going. Only lost a little bit of time. Rosenquist, who had a great showing in this race. I mean, he's finally starting to, showcase his talent. Been a little down on him, in recent weeks, but it looks like he's starting to finally put it all together. This was without a doubt his best race, and as I'll talk about in a minute, he damn near overtook his teammate, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. Rosenquist with a great move for second on Alexander Rossi in turn 4 on lap 17. He made some great moves in this race as well. Dixon also gets by Rossi for third on lap 19. It's interesting that Dixon is the only multi-time winner at Mid-Ohio in the IndyCar series, and he's won 5 times at this point. Spoiler alert, that number's going to increase, but it didn't come easy, I'll tell you that much. Well, for the most part, it came easy until the end of the race. Rosenquist starts closing on Power for the lead, and Dixon starts closing in on both of them. And then we get I believe it's our one and only lead change on lap 26 with Felix Rosenquist passing Will Power. So Rosenquist pits from the lead on lap 29. Power and Dixon pit on lap 30. At first, Rosenquist was going to do a 3-stop strategy, but that changed midway through this run. By the way, this race went caution-free, for the second straight year, which is crazy. Lots of caution-free races this year from both IndyCar and NASCAR. It's kind of crazy. That's nice. It keeps the race moving. Newgarden inherits the race lead because he's on the 3-stop strategy. Power and Dixon were fighting hard for position at the top of the hill, turn 5. Even making a little bit of contact, so quite a bit of pushing and shoving there. Dixon finally gets around Power for position in turn 4. Pagenaud and Ryan Hunter-Reay start closing on Newgarden for the race lead. Pagenaud and Colton Herta pit on lap 37. Newgarden pits from the lead on lap 41. Sebastian Bourdais gets hit with a rare pit road speeding penalty, which is incredibly weird in the IndyCar series because the IndyCars have built-in pit road speed limiters. So for Bourdais to get a pit road speeding penalty is really weird. Can't remember if that's actually the first one we've seen all year. I mean, that's how rare it is in IndyCar nowadays because they have that built into the race car. So Rosenqvist inherits the race lead. He has a 13-second lead, but then he decides to pit from the lead on lap 45. So the 10 team decides to abandon the 2-stop strategy and go to a 3-stop strategy. To be fair, it almost won the race anyway. So Pickett pits. He was one of the last ones to pit on, allowing Dixon to inherit the race lead, and he would pretty much dominate, the majority of the second half of the race. He has a 9.5-second lead over Power at this point. Rosenqvist passes Power to regain second, but is 14 seconds behind Scott Dixon, so Dixon basically has a massive lead at this point. Alexander Rossi kicks off the final round of pit stops on lap 59, so he was basically doing the 2-stopper as well. But he was pretty close on fuel, and he actually ran out of fuel just past the start-finish line, so that's how close he cut it. Dixon pits from the lead on lap 60, and then Rosenqvist pits on lap 67. A great battle for 7th between Pagenaud, Pickett, and Herta, but not much else happens for about the next 10 laps. But Dixon only has a 5-second lead with 10 laps to go. He decided to go on the softer reds for the final stint, but as that final run started going long, those tires really started to fall off, and you could tell because some of the lap down cars were actually catching Dixon. And Rosenqvist was closing the gap to Dixon, and Ryan Hunter-Reay and Newgarden were really closing in on both of them. I mean, at some points they were 2 seconds a lap faster than the top 2 drivers. So Ryan Hunter-Reay and Justin Newgarden really had a chance to get by the Ganassi cars. And the lap cars were really causing some problems for the leaders. So, but Rosenqvist was able to clear the lap cars, coming to the white flag, and he was right on Scott Dixon's ass. And Chip Ganassi said, "Have at it, boys, just don't wreck each other." So now we come to the final lap of the race, and a lot, and I mean a lot, happened in this final lap, so get ready. Rosenqvist tries to make the move on Dixon in the keyhole. Had the inside line on him, but Dixon kind of cuts him off a little bit, and Rosenqvist kind of runs up on the curb as well, and they actually make a little bit of contact, which was pretty crazy. And then at the same time, Newgarden tries to get underneath of one second. Sorry about that, I was getting something set up here. So getting back to this white flag, at the same time, Newgarden tries to make a run underneath of Ryan Hunter-Reay, fighting for the 3rd position. Makes contact with Ryan Hunter-Reay and spins at the exit of the keyhole, gets stuck in the kitty litter, and stalls the car. And I'm just like, oh my god. that was some major championship implications, and he was going to gain points on Rossi in this championship. Not much, because Rossi was only a few positions back. Actually, 2 positions back, I think, and tried to get onto the podium in this race, and ended up throwing it away, which had some huge championship implications. And Rosenqvist, he was trying everything he could to get around Scott Dixon. He was getting alongside him in turn 5 at the top of the hill, trying to do a crossover move, and Dixon was able to hold him off. Rosenqvist had one last move to the inside coming off the final corner, but just came up short, less than 1/10 of a second. That's how close it was. From what they're saying, it was the closest finish in Mid-Ohio history, which is pretty crazy to think about. But Scott Dixon wins the Honda Indy 200 at Mid-Ohio in one of the closest finishes of the year. Rosenqvist finishes second, his first career podium actually, which is kind of surprising. And Ryan Hunter-Reay comes home with the top 3. And like I said, this is the second straight year that Mid-Ohio has gone caution-free. So the official race results, and I noticed that because I got the race results screen from NBC Sports, and I noticed that they got the wrong number graphic for Scott Dixon. They actually have it as number 22 instead of the number 9. And it's with black numbers and a white background. That's a fail. But that aside, Scott Dixon, of course, wins the race the 6th time that he has won it, Mid-Ohio, and gets himself back into the championship picture after being pretty much out of it the last couple weeks. Felix Rosenqvist, the highest finishing rookie, with his best career finish. Ryan Hunter-Reay comes home 3rd. Will Power with a top 5 run, although he still has not won this year. Alexander Rossi comes home in 5th. Ran out of gas coming across the line and had to pull it off at the exit of pit road. So he cut that really close, but it paid off for him in the end. Simon Pagenaud in 6th. He also gained points in the championship, which we'll talk about in a minute. Spencer Pigot, Colton Herta, Graham Rahal, Jack Harvey finishes in the top 10. That's a great run for him. And Sebastian Bourdais and Santino Ferrucci round out the top half of the field. So, championship standings. 4 races remaining. Bit of shuffling around in the top 10 in points. Newgarden continues to lead the way, but that mistake on the final lap cost him 12 championship points. And it's like I said, I think the previous week, no championship lead is safe under this format. Especially when you consider that Laguna Seca is double points. So, at this point, with the double points format, there are currently 4 drivers that are still mathematically eligible for the championship. Newgarden, of course, Alexander Rossi, only 16 points back, so once again in chase mode, much like last year. Different guys chasing though. Simon Pagenaud closes to within 47 points of the lead, and Scott Dixon, who won the race, is now 62 points back, so still a bit of a long shot, but he's still in the picture. You can never count out Scott Dixon. Will Power still top 5, but he's pretty much out of the picture at this point. RHR, Takuma Sato, who lost the position to RHR. Graham Rahal is 8th. Felix Rosenqvist moves up to 9th with his runner-up finish. And James Hinchcliffe drops to 10th in point standings. And you have Bourdais and Pigot rounding out the top dozen. As for my final rating for Mid-Ohio, there was some good racing. There were some parts, especially in the about the halfway point to about 10 laps to go, that was really boring. But the race went caution free and had a crazy ass finish, man. Of course, the closest finish in Mid-Ohio history for the IndyCar series. And like I said, the second straight year of having a caution-free race, and that's always a good thumbs up for me. So my final rating for Mid-Ohio, I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. I'll give it a solid 6. It was alright. I enjoyed it for the most part. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get into the Cup Series review at Pocono. Alright, so the 2019 Gander RV 400 at Pocono. Second time we've been here this season. I'm going to be completely honest here. My expectations for this race was low as fuck. Because when you consider what we saw in that race back in June, my expectations were not high for this race whatsoever. I guess the owners of the track kind of realized that as well, so they decided to put down some PJ1 on the track, the grip strips basically on the outside of the turns, which actually helped a little bit. So this race was actually not as bad as I thought it would be, which is kind of crazy to think about. 9 cars failed pre-race inspection and had to go to the rear of the field, so that was interesting. Kevin Harvick, of course, still high off of his win at New Hampshire the previous week, starts from the pole. And of course, as usual, they fan out down the front stretch. Of course, the restarts at Pocono are pretty damn crazy because of the fact that they have so much room down the front stretch. They just fan out everywhere. Harvick leads lap number 1. The JGR cars of Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Eric Jones were 3 wide a couple of times on 2 straight laps, which was pretty interesting. Brad Keselowski smacks the wall and has to come to pit road for repairs on lap 6. Didn't know if he would actually recover from this, but he actually recovered nicely. And was actually a contender for a bit in the latter half of the race. But after a promising start, it's already starting to look like the June race by lap 14. Everybody's spread out and the race has gotten boring as hell. Bowman kicks off green flag pit stops on lap 15. Hamlin gets by Jones for the 4th position. There was some pit strategy going on, but nothing too special at this point. Hamlin begins closing the gap on Harvick as both drivers pit on lap 40. So, you know, the 2 guys that were kind of the center of the finish last week in New Hampshire, once again looking to do battle again here at Pocono. Kyle Busch cycles out with the race lead. Eric Jones has a little bit of an issue that he would have to deal with for the rest of the race. A broken track bar adjuster. So they're not able to adjust the track bar. That kind of sucks. Seems like Jones really has troubles with mechanical issues so far this year, which has certainly put a damper on his championship hopes, but he has run well this year. He's just had some crazy bad luck as far as mechanical failures and all that stuff. Didn't really let it affect him all that much in this race, though, as his final finishing position certainly shows. And he's still, you know, solidly in the playoff right now. So Kyle Larson up to 6th after starting 29th. He had a dynamite car in the first stage. Hamlin passes Truex for 4th. Harvick catches up with Logano for 2nd. But Kyle Busch would end up winning stage 1 in what was a snoozer of a stage. Stage 1 fucking sucked. And it was like, yeah, this is starting to look like the June race. Things would start changing a little bit here in stage 2. But second verse, same as the first though. Harvick leads the start of stage number 2. Kyle Busch gets up to 4th past Paul Menard. Ryan Newman and Denny Hamlin battling for second. Yes, you heard me correctly, Ryan Newman. Kyle Busch around the outside of Newman for third in turn 3. So the outside move in turn 3, which was never really a thing at Pocono. Usually you'd get a run on the inside of drivers off of turn 3. But as it turned out, the outside line with the PJ1 compound was actually a thing in this race, which was very surprising. But it actually made a lot of passes off of turn 3 possible, which was nice considering the reduced horsepower prevents these guys from shifting now. Ryan Blaney comes in early for right side tires. Kyle Larson up to 4th at this point, and Kyle Busch up to 2nd, just 1.5 seconds back of Harvick. Harvick gets stuck behind the 12 of Ryan Blaney, just can't seem to get around him with the dirty air in front of him. And Kyle Busch is able to catch up with them and gets around the outside of Harvick in turn 3 for our first and only pure lead change of the day. Actually, no, there was actually another lead change. I'm sorry. We actually had 2 pure lead changes in this race as opposed to the one back in June. Yay for progress! Although, to be fair, this race was definitely better than the one in June. But we have our first pure lead change on lap 72. So it still took a while. I mean, it took nearly to the halfway point of the race to get our first pure lead change, if that tells you anything. Harvick comes in on lap 79 for his second stop of the day. And then our first caution comes out on lap 83, which really throws a monkey wrench into Kyle Busch's plans. Chase Elliott blows a right front tire and smashes the turn 3 wall hard, which puts Elliott out of the race. I'll tell you what, man, Elliott has had a rough 2 months. I mean, I don't think he's had a top 10 finish since the previous race in Pocono back in June. I mean, it's just been mechanical failure after mechanical failure after mechanical failure. It has not been a good 2 months for Chase Elliott. But all hope is not lost, though, because they are going to Watkins Glen this week. And the Glen has been kind to Chase in the past. I mean, it is the site of his maiden victory last year, so after a great battle with Truex, by the way. So all's not lost in the Elliott camp, but it has definitely been a dark 2 months for that 9 team. Anywho, Kyle Busch stays out, which was really interesting, and while most of the field comes in for service. Kyle Busch leads on the restart. We had some 4 wide off of turn 1, which made me go woohoo. Lots of shuffling going on in the bottom half of the top 10. And if that wasn't enough, there was actually a little bit of rain in the area. And it's just like, Jesus. What is it with Mother Nature these past couple weeks? That may be why Kyle Busch decided to stay out, although it turned out to be ill-advised. Caution number 2 on lap 92 for rain. But fortunately, it was just a small cell that blew through. So they waited a couple laps and eventually it passed them by. Didn't really do enough to lose the track, fortunately, so there was that. Several cars come in for service. Kyle Busch leads on the restart, but he did need to pit soon. And he had to pit basically coming to 2 laps to go. Johnson up to 2nd on this restart, and I was kind of like, what? Lots of 3 wide in the midfield. And then Kyle Busch came to pit road just before the 2 laps to go, before the pits were closed. Then we get our 3rd caution on lap 98 when Daniel Suarez gets loose in turn 2 and pushes up into Ryan Blaney, which puts the 12 into the wall. Suarez gets massive damage on his right side, and Blaney spins in turn 3 from a cut tire. So a lot of chaos here at the end of stage number 2. And Jimmy Johnson wins stage 2 under caution, and believe it or not, this is only his 2nd stage win of his career. Let that sink in for a minute. But big deal for Johnson. He's, like I said, he's trying to get into the playoff. And Gets 10 stage points, which is a big deal. Several cars come in for service. So now we come to the start of stage 3, and oh, look at this. Kevin Harvick leading once again. I believe this is the last time he would lead, though, because Hamlin challenges and takes the lead from Harvick on the restart. So Hamlin, who used to be the king of Pocono before the repave, is now all of a sudden back in the driver's seat and challenging for the win. Our fourth caution came out on lap 115 when Ryan Preece gets sideways in turn 1 after losing the right rear tire and smashes the turn 1 wall hard. That's typically the case at Pocono because, I mean, you're going 180 miles, and even with these restricted engines, you're still going at like at least 180 miles an hour going into turn 1. So if something happens there, like a cut tire or a brake failure, you're hitting that wall a ton. So those safer barriers are really a godsend. Everyone comes in for service right at the edge of the pit window. So this is when the race became a fuel mileage race. So yeah, pretty interesting. Eric Jones wins the race off pit road, which makes this thing interesting. But Kyle Busch stays out and leads on the restart. But they decided they were going to gamble and come and pit in the middle of the final stage. Which, by the way, stages 1 and 2 were 50 laps, and stage 3 was 60 laps. I don't think I mentioned that at the beginning of the review. JGR is 1 through 4 right now as they fan out down the Long Pond straightaway. Keselowski gets by Hamlin for 4th, although Hamlin does get him back. The 38 of David Reagan hits the wall in turn 3 hard, but he actually manages to get back around to the pits. No caution for this. As it turned out, Paul Menard pushed up into Reagan off of turn 3, which turned the 38 into the wall. Kyle Busch pits from the lead on lap 135. Eric Jones inherits the race lead at this point. And then Hamlin decided, okay, it's time to go. So he gets by Truex for second on lap 143, and then we get our second pure lead change of the day on lap 144 when Hamlin takes the lead from Jones. Truex gets by Jones for second, and then Harvick gets by Jones for third. A lot of the field in fuel saving mode at this point. Then this whole thing changes with our fifth caution of the day on lap 153. The 53 of Josh Bellici, I think that's his name, comes to a stop on the back stretch. I think they said it was from a snapped axle. That's why he came to a stop. So several cars come in for service. Hamlin leads on the restart with 4 laps to go. The field fans out down the front stretch. And then we get our 6th caution on lap 157, and this is where I'm really going to address a few things here in a second. So as the field goes 3 wide coming off of turn 1, the 14 of Clint Boyer pushes up, which causes Kurt Busch to have to try to move up to avoid him. Unfortunately, Stenhouse was on his outside and he wasn't quite clear of the 17 car, so he puts Stenhouse into the wall, and he also puts himself into the wall. So a lot of damage to the 1 car as well as the 17 car. That wasn't the cause of the caution though. The cause of the caution was this. Stenhouse catches back up with Kurt going down the Long Pond straightaway and turns right. Yes, you heard me correctly. Turns right, hooks Kurt Busch, and spins him out intentionally right into the path of the 34 of Michael McDowell, which destroys the 34 car as well, and actually sends it airborne for a second or two. So that puts Kurt and Michael McDowell out of the race. And I'm going to segue for a second here, and this actually leads into My dumbass of the week segments. Let's get into that. My dumbass of the week is actually a collection of dumbasses. And this week's recipients are Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and his fucking fan base. Now the reason why I say that is Stenhouse, I mean, when you look at this, that was about the most reckless thing he could have done on the track, especially on a track as fast as Pocono. You know, I mean, and he didn't even see the whole deal of what happened. I mean, it's not like Kurt intentionally put him into the wall. I mean, he had to move up when Clint Bowyer came up the track, and it sent both of them into the wall. That was a racing incident. What Stenhouse did with Busch was not a racing incident. It was reckless as shit. I mean, he potentially put two drivers in danger of being significantly injured. And I know some people are going to say, well, you know, these cars are safe. Yeah, they are, but these drivers are not immune to injury. I mean, look what happened with Kurt. I mean, he nearly got turned. I mean, he got turned driver's side towards oncoming traffic. I mean, what do you think would have happened if he got T-boned in the driver's side by another driver going 160, 170 miles an hour? I mean, I know these race cars are safer now than they've ever been, but the risk of injury is still there. Same goes for Mike McDowell, who got airborne, nearly got onto his top. But the real danger, you know, was getting airborne and then coming down with a significant amount of force. That could cause back injuries. I mean, look what happened to Eric Almirola at Kentucky a couple years ago. Put him out of the car for months. So, what Ricky Stenhouse did was reckless as shit, but then again, you know, that's his reputation. You know, and then his response on Twitter to the whole thing just spoke of how arrogant this fuck is. So, one second. Let's see if I can find it here. Pretty sure I already put it in. Yeah, here we go. So, Kurt Busch, who's actually mellowed quite a bit since, you know, his wild early years when he was just let his temper get the best of him a lot of times, tweeted out, after sleeping on it, I've decided to take the high road with the Stenhouse incident. Hopefully he won't wreck me up there as well, which was kind of funny. And then Stenhouse, in a very douchebag way, says, take the road on over if you really want to handle it. You have my number.
Give me a fucking break, man.
Yeah, real nice response, Stenhouse, you dumb shit. I mean, first you wreck the guy, and then you have such an arrogant response to him on Twitter. I mean, it's no wonder there aren't a lot of people that like you, and why you have a reputation, you know, as this asshole who, let's be honest here, has a lot of unwarranted self-importance. I mean, what the fuck has this guy done in the Cup Series since he got that ride at Roush? Other than the wins at Daytona and Talladega, jack fucking shit. But you know what's even worse than Stenhouse being arrogant? His fucking fan base defending him over a reckless act. Okay, let's take a look at some of these responses. Okay, there was one guy who was like, serious, this incident was started by Kurt. I have no issue with Ricky turning him after he got into him. Are you that stupid? Did you not see Clint Bowyer come up in front of Kurt and push him up the track? It was a racing incident, dude. it's still no excuse for Ricky to turn him like a fucking moron.
I don't understand why that's so hard to understand.
Then you have another guy saying, I don't know why people are mad at Stenhouse, but Kurt's tire came down plus he bounced off the wall. Fucking morons. You know, and then there was this one guy on YouTube who was like, let me guess. Many people are going against Stenhouse. Not his fault this time. Stenhouse got squeezed into the wall and Stenhouse was mad about that. If any of you disagrees about that, screw you. Well, how about this? Fuck you.
You guys are a bunch of fucks.
Okay, because you are fucking blind. And there's another guy that's like, Rich coming from a fan of a driver that couldn't even hack it in SHR equipment. Suarez replaced him. Take that in for a minute. Does this guy even realize how fucking stupid that tweet sounds? Okay, let's look at this for a minute. Kurt Busch has 31 career Cup victories, an All-Star win, a Daytona 500 win, and a Cup championship. What the fuck has Suarez done in the Cup Series? Exactly. And Kurt is taking that #1 car to heights it hasn't seen in years. And then you look at Suarez, who didn't do jack shit in that 20 car, or actually the 19 car, excuse me. Gets booted from that. And then you look at what Truex is doing. He has, I think, 4 wins this year? 3 or 4 wins this year? And then you look at Suarez in the 41 car, which was Kurt's old ride. What has Suarez done in the 41 car? Nothing. And not only that, he's on the outside looking in the playoff right now. Whereas Kurt will probably, at the very least, go probably to the top 8, at the very least. I swear, Ricky Stenhouse's fan base is some of the biggest bunch of pussies I've ever seen. Never in my life have I seen a fan base become so sensitive when they have their driver called out over something. Especially when it's warranted. Okay, what Stenhouse did was reckless as shit and could have caused injuries to 2 drivers. So for those of you defending him over that, you are a bunch of fucking idiots. And you're just as much of a scumbag as Stenhouse is. So Stenhouse needs to learn to shut his fucking mouth, and he needs to learn his place. Because, honestly, he is a talentless hack. He has done jack shit since he came up to the Cup Series. And the day that Jack Roush finally boots this guy out of the 17 car and into obscurity will be a day worth celebrating, in my opinion. Because as far as I'm concerned, this guy does not belong in the Cup Series whatsoever. And that's all I got to say about that. Speaking of Suarez, he gets hit with a restart violation. As it turned out, NASCAR decided to take a look at some of the restarts from the New Hampshire race, particularly where Almirola basically laid back on one of the restarts, which they didn't really like, so they decided to enforce it. For the Pocono race, Suarez was laying back quite a bit and got a nice run on the cars in front of him, which NASCAR did not like, so they hit Suarez with a restart violation. Which I agree with. I mean, you could clearly see that he was laying back, which you're not supposed to do. So, with all that, we're going into overtime. So, Hamlin leads on the first overtime restart, which was actually the only one, actually. Larson had a great run around the outside. I'm thinking, oh my god, he might have a shot at Hamlin, but hits the turn 1 wall. Go figure. Jones manages to get back up into second, but Hamlin holds everybody at bay and wins the Gander RV 400 at Pocono for his 3rd win of the year. I believe it's like 5th at Pocono. Alright, so looking at the top 10 results, it's a JGR 1-2-3 with Denny Hamlin with the win, Eric Jones 2nd, Martin Truex Jr. 3rd. William Byron started 31st on the grid, was one of the drivers that failed pre-race inspection. Comes home in 4th. Kyle Larson in 5th. Harvick started from pole but ends up 6th. Daniel Hemrick, the highest finishing rookie, comes home 7th. Brad Keselowski overcomes all of his problems to finish in 8th. Kyle Busch, who had one of the dominant cars early on, finishes 9th. And Ryan Blaney, despite all his problems in this race, actually comes home with a top 10 finish. And let's not forget, he was put in the wall and spun out in turn 3 at one point. So he actually came home in the 10th position. That's pretty crazy. So, point standings. Joey Logano continues to lead the way. He has a 6-point advantage over Kyle Busch. And don't forget, the regular season title was still on the line. And that's 15 playoff points right there. Harvick is 3rd, 85 points back. So he is way far back. He's 2 races back at this point. So really the regular season title is between Logano and Busch. Hamlin is 4th, Truex moves up to 5th, Keselowski drops down to 6th. Kurt Busch is 7th. So yeah, he's really not hacking it right now in that, Chip Ganassi car. Chase Elliott remains in 8th. Despite all of his problems, he's still 8th in the points, and he's in the playoff anyway with his win at Talladega. Eric Almirola, the highest of the drivers that have not won this year. Ryan Blaney moves up 1 spot to 10th, and this is overall. Alex Bowman drops to 11th, William Byron in 12th, so 3 of the 4 Hendrick cars are in the playoff right now. Of course, the lone guy that's out is Jimmy Johnson at the moment. And then you have Eric Jones, Kyle Larson, Clint Bowyer, and Ryan Newman rounding out your top 16. In fact, I think all the drivers who've won are in the top 16 right now. So basically the guys that you see in the top 16, they're the guys that will be in at this point. So the first guy out is actually Jimmy Johnson, even though you don't see it. He's 12 points out at this point. As for my final rating for the Gander RV 400, I will admit it was a much better race than I expected. Certainly a lot better than the one in June, although it didn't really start that way. Stage 1 was garbage. It really was. The start was promising, but then the rest of the stage sucked. Started getting interesting from stage 2 onward, though. I mean, it still wasn't that great. I mean, we still only had 2 pure lead changes the entire day. But the fuel mileage was a little bit interesting, even though everybody made it. I think those cautions definitely helped, though. But this was definitely a much better race than I anticipated. Still wasn't the best, but it wasn't terrible either. So, my final rating for the Gander RV 400 at Pocono, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. It was alright. I mean, it wasn't spectacular, but it wasn't garbage either. So, 5 is what I'll give it. Well, this has gone on long enough. A lot longer than I expected. Almost an hour at this point. So, thank you very much for watching. And I will see you this coming week when I review Watkins Glen. Oh, and I will be reviewing the Eldora race that the Truck Series will be holding this Thursday. My lone Truck Series review of the year. That'll be fun. So that'll do it. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Well, that is all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, favorite, like, and subscribe to my channels here on youtube.com and over on bitshoot.com. If you would like to sponsor my channel, go to my channel page at subscribestar.com. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out. Have a good one.